Hi guys, Ianeth here. I thought I'd do something a little bit different today, specifically this video. Now, you guys seem to really enjoy the character creation article that I put out where I walked through creating a character in the way that I do it, or one of the ways that I do it. And I thought I'd expand that a little bit and talk more about the process of creating a story in general, because a lot of the problems that authors and other creators encounter when it comes to putting together a story have to do with the very, very first step. And that very, very first step is just building the foundation that your story exists in. And I'm going to sort of walk you through one of the methods that I use. It's actually the method that I use fairly successfully for the majority of my stories, I would like to think. And it is something that I've sort of been going back and forth on for a while, and I decided to sort of share it with you because I find that by talking about these things and engaging with them, we can come up with better ideas, or maybe I can help one of you start writing something if that's something that you're interested in. So, just a quick disclaimer, just as I sort of look and see a cat in the background here. If one of my cats just kind of walks past me, or you hear meowing or barking or something of that nature, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. So, let's sort of begin, I guess, with this sort of first video, since I'm hoping to do more. The first thing that you have to do with creating a story, if I'm writing a book, what's the first step? Well, the first step is obviously having an idea, right? Is having this space to work in. Now, there's this pretty common misconception that I find when I talk to people about writing and about their process of creating writing, and this idea that in order to have a world to create something, that it starts complex, that it must be complicated. So, for example, something like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings has a lot of interlocking parts. It's got a lot of story elements that are working. It's got an intricate and detailed backstory. It's got just sort of a lot of things at play there. And for the most part, that's pretty true with most pieces of fiction that you're going to be interacting with, especially because it's true for the real world, right? So there's this notion that you need to have all of those complicated pieces fitting together from the very beginning, or things are going to fall apart. And I'm going to try to show you how you don't have to start there. You have to get there, but you don't have to start there. So the first step that I use is to start with a basic idea. Now, for the purposes of this example, I'm going to be walking you through the process that I went through to create my novel, Leviathans. Now, the basic idea that I had was one day I was watching TV or something, I think it was, and I was seeing an ad or something like that for something steampunk related. I think it was actually related to the Renaissance Festival in my area, and how they were doing a steampunk weekend. And steampunk has always been pretty interesting to me. I think it's pretty cool. But I started to think, it would be cooler, at least to me, than just regular steampunk. Well, what if it was steampunk, but with magic, right? So what if instead of things being driven by steam and electricity, they were driven by magic, right? So I just had this super basic idea. So the very basic idea that I started with was steampunk, but with magic. So that's it. That's the beginning of the process. The beginning of the process is just start with something really, really simple that you think is interesting. In fact, I would go as far as to say start with something that sounds maybe kind of dumb and just see what you can build up from it, right? But we'll get to the build up in a moment. The first step is to just have an idea. So in this case, steampunk, but with magic. But now, obviously, you could try to just write a story based on nothing but that basic idea. Steampunk, but with magic. But in my experience, you'll end up running into some problems as you go along. Because while steampunk, but with magic is maybe decently well defined in your head, it's hard to pin down in the world. And what I mean by that is, if that's all that you're working off of, you don't really know how the universe that you are writing in functions. And it's important for you, at least as the author, to have an idea, even if a very basic one, of how that works. Oh, sorry. That was my alarm. So you have to be able to take this basic idea and expand it. You have to be able to take it and make something a bit more robust with it, something that's easier to build off of. If you think of it like the foundation of a building, this idea is like sort of sand, you know? Building something on top of it is possible. It's just very difficult to make work properly. So we have to sort of build around this idea, strengthen it a little bit, give it some more robustness, right? So what I did from there was I built on that idea by asking dumb questions. And these really are just like stupid questions, right? And it's just things along the lines of, okay, so in a world with steampunk but with magic, how does that work? And I'm not talking about the inner workings of it. I'm talking like, what does that mean, right? Well, they, I guess, gather, how does it work? Well, steampunk works by gathering steam and generating steam and using that to generate electricity. Cool. But then steampunk with magic then? Well, okay, do they just gather magic and use magic instead? Can it be that easy? Can we just like say that they make magic and then use the magic to do things? Well, yeah, why not, right? So that's that one stupid question answered. How does it work? Well, they take magic from the environment and they use it the way that you would use steam or electricity. Cool. That seems simple enough. Now, then we have another stupid question. If magic exists and we already use it, why is it just steampunk? Why isn't this full-on fantasy? Why don't we have people throwing fireballs at each other all of the time? Well, the simple answer to that question is I don't want them to. I don't want to write that story, which means that I need to come up with a believable reason as to why that wouldn't be the case. And in Leviathans specifically, the answer I came up with to the stupid question was magic is really hard to do. It's not as easy as picking up a wand or saying some magic words and doing it. It's more difficult than that, which means that most people don't do it. They rely instead on the technology that we already established, the steampunk, but with magic. So now we have two of the answers to these questions, which means that we started with the idea of steampunk, but with magic, and we built on it, and now we know a little bit more about the world. So the other things that we know about the world are that magic is hard, and that it's really sort of as easy as using magic like electricity or steam, right? I'll just leave a question mark there because, frankly, maybe I want to change that a little bit later, but let's just leave it like this for now. Seems fine, right? So now, not only do I have my basic idea, the basic template for my world of steampunk but magic, I also have these sort of more complicated ideas built up onto it. I have the idea that because magic is difficult, people must use this technology, and it's used by pulling magic from the environment to drive technology. Okay, so now we've sort of built a slightly more robust picture, right? So we've already answered 2 of these stupid questions. Now, the thing is that when you go to do this, you want to try to answer as many of these stupid questions as you can, but you don't want to spend too long thinking about it. So if you have an idea and you think of 3 or 4 questions and you answer them, well, that's it. You can move on from there and start building on top of those. But in this case, the 2 questions so far, I think to me, are sort of the most obvious ones, right? How does it work, and why doesn't everybody just use magic? All right, that's why. Cool. Now, we can use the answers to these questions to strengthen our foundation even further, right? So, now that we have the basic ideas and these other more complicated things built into them, we know that people use their technology because magic is difficult to apply. Okay, cool. Now, naturally, to me at least, this leads to another question. And that question is, if magic is difficult to use, if magic is difficult to work with, where do these machines, where do these things come from? How are they built? How do they work? Well, that is an interesting question. And this is where, instead of asking now the stupid questions, we're asking more questions that are based on them. So that's the next step of things. So now, how does that work? How do they get these things? Well, there's a few different answers that we could come up with. We can come up with saying that, they are built very meticulously, and it takes a very long time, and it's very difficult, and that leads to there not being a lot of this technology everywhere. That's one possible answer to the question. Another possible answer to the question is, well, they don't. They don't build these things. They find them. They're already scattered around, and the society that exists doesn't know how to make them. Just find them. That's cool. Personally, I think that answer is a little cooler, at least in my head. So that's what I'll run with. I'll run with people don't know how to build these things. All right, so now our world is even more fleshed out because just this sentence implies a whole lot of other consequences, right? So if they don't know how to build these things and they have to find them, so they find them, who finds them? How do they find them? Well, the natural answer to that question is adventurers. There are adventurers that go around and get things. So we've added another layer. There we go. So now we've taken steampunk, but with magic, and we've expanded it out into a world where you have people who go out to find artifacts that are used to drive the technology in day-to-day life. To me, that seems like a fairly interesting premise. But there's still one hiccup, at least that I can imagine, which is what happens when these things break, right? I mean, it's a kind of natural question. I mean, technology in our lives breaks all the time. Microwave stops working, the computer blue screens. So what happens when the magic generator in your house stops working? Who do you call, right? So then we answer that question. There are people who can fix them. even if they can't build them. There we go. That's the answer that I came up with. So now we've got a better spread. From here, we do the final thing, which is to polish this foundation into one more cohesive whole. So we already have our basic idea. From that basic idea, we pulled two questions, two kind of basic, stupid questions about the idea itself. From the answers to those two questions, we pulled another couple of questions. And now we've actually built already, in these few short steps, a pretty intricate world, if you think about it. We've decided that the world is, in fact, steampunk but with magic, right? So let's just call it techno-magical. Right? So we have a techno-magical world. In this techno-magical world, society is basically split into three groups, right? We've got the normal people, who are people that we would find in our day-to-day lives. They're bakers, they're builders, they're kings and queens, they're, the guy who works at the grocery store. They're people, just regular people that would exist in our world. You have the normal people then. You have the adventurers, who serve to find the artifacts that drive the techno-magical world. And you have the people who fix them. Let's just call them the repair people for this particular example. So, these three groups, they're interrelated and they interact with each other. And now, in my view, we've got a pretty decent foundation for things. But there are one or two more questions that we can ask at this step, which are important, and they'll help us further polish the foundation. If we have these adventures, if we have these people that look for these artifacts, it implies that you have to find them somewhere, right? So where do they find them, right? Where do they come from? Well, there's, again, a ton of answers to this question. So I'm just going to take one, for example, the one that I actually ended up using for Leviathans, which is they find them in ruins. There was an ancient civilization that made these things. Now they're gone, and people search their ruins, the ruins of what they left behind, for these artifacts. Cool. That's an answer to that question, right? So now we've got a little bit more kind of built up, because now we have a role for the adventurers to play and how they fulfill that role. Cool. So now there's a couple of other questions that I can ask, and most of them are no longer basic. Most of them don't really have any more to do with how you take a basic idea and you turn it into a world that you build in, right? So this is just sort of the steps that I take, or that I took for Leviathans, where I started with the basic idea. I moved from that basic idea by asking questions, very simple ones. Once I had the answers to those simple questions, I created another, basically, set of questions that were related to them. So once I had the answers to the two easy questions, more questions arose from them naturally. And by deciding what the answers to those questions were, I ended up with an immediately more complex world. From there, I can take the answers to all of these questions I've asked so far and condense them into what they actually mean. So, again, in the case of this world, what it actually means, what the answers to these questions actually mean, is that there is a techno-magical world where magic is used in lieu of electricity or steam. There are roughly three groups of people in the society: the normal people, who don't really do anything with this stuff, the adventurers, who find it, and the repair people, who fix it. And these things are found in ruins of ancient civilizations. So that is a pretty robust base for starting a story. From here, there are a few different steps that you can take, but I'm going to leave them for a different video because I think this one is already running kind of long. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and sort of leave your comments below and let me know what you think, and if you want to see more of how this process kind of builds itself up. So thanks, and have a nice one. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my content, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on the little bell so you know when I release a new video. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and if you want to know more about my writing, there's a link to my websites in the description. Talk to you next time.